Veganism and antinatalism are two different positions and movements, but they are actually connected in a few ways. Both are ethical positions that aim to reduce the harm caused as much as possible. Obviously, if antinatalism is extended to all sentient beings, the antinatalist is also against the creation of animals in factory farms. In turn, vegans tend to have a position similar to antinatalism toward domestic animals, by supporting the view that we ought not to create new animals that are going to be imprisoned, harmed, or killed by humans, or when there are already many animals who need to be taken care of. The idea is generally that if you have the opportunity to look after animals, you should adopt instead. So the creation of animals itself is not seen as something morally wrong in a categorical way, but the fact that their creation takes away resources from those who are in need is considered at least problematic by vegans. While breeding for economic ends and creating animals to exploit them is always condemned, even though that's not about reproduction itself. Also, many vegans are already anti-natalist about human reproduction from the point of view of the harm that they would likely cause to the animals indirectly through their children. Normally, however, misanthropic anti-natalist arguments are not part of veganism, although by definition and by logic they should, I think. But if we think about it, that's actually a good thing. It is a very important. It is very important that it's like that, because otherwise, people approaching veganism and willing to consider the idea of becoming vegan would be far fewer. People would oppose veganism even more, and veganism would spread much slower. Instead, it is necessary to adopt a pragmatic and strategic point of view in this case. It's important that veganism and antinatalism remain two clearly separated positions and movements. If this is true with regard of misanthropic antinatalism, it's even more important regarding philanthropic one. I am vegan, and I think animal agriculture is the most serious and cruel thing that human beings do on the planet. I think supporting animal agriculture is always unjustifiable. I do think that antinatalists should be vegan, but not because they are antinatalists, but because they are humans. Every human being should be vegan. It doesn't seem like the spread of antinatalism has the same opportunity compared with the spread of veganism for a variety of reasons. If antinatalism was part of veganism, vegans would be fewer and the spread of veganism would be strongly limited. For most people, antinatalism is difficult to understand, and for many, it's even scary and depressing. Many are already afraid of becoming vegan because they are frightened by the idea of totally changing their habits and their view of the world and society, as well as being seen as different, as judgmental towards others, in contrast with society, or they are afraid to experience hostility or to no longer enjoy or feel comfortable with other people. In addition, different views from those learned, common views that they have always lived with, appear absurd and not at all interesting or advantageous. Antinatalism carries a load of negativity that should not be underestimated. It can be lived lightly, but it requires a drastic and profound change of perspective. I don't think it's a trivial matter. It somehow entails questioning one's own existence. It entails accepting the anti-intuitive view that it would have been better never to come into existence. It requires rationally understanding the concept of general non-existence as opposed to that of the existence of particular beings that already exist. It entails being aware that by creating us, our parents have made a big mistake. They have been selfish. They have seriously harmed us without justification. They deluded us that there was nothing wrong with our creation, or even that we should be grateful for that. They deceived us. So all of these thoughts are heavy to digest. So it can be a heavy view to face and a difficult one to elaborate. It's a view that, in my opinion, can be elaborated and it can be lived positively without any major bad consequence on our mood or on our lives, but it must be managed psychologically, and that's not always easy. Most people had or will have at least one child during the course of their lives. So, for these people, antinatalism requires admitting to themselves that they have seriously harmed their children by creating them. It is a strong sense of guilt to face. For many of those who want to have a child, it appears they perceived it as a big waiver. Not to mention that antinatalism is much less intuitive than veganism. Vegans, I think, are actually a category of people who can become antinatalist more easily. It is one of those characteristics that increases the possibility of understanding human antinatalism as well as antinatalism applied to all sentient beings. Through veganism, antinatalism can spread more in the world population, even though in a limited way. But if antinatalism starts to spread quickly among vegans, now that vegans are still a small percentage of the population and would still have the potential to spread to a much larger slice of it, vegans would start advocating for antinatalism together with veganism, and this would slow down its spread. This could block the spread of veganism, and together with it, also the spread of antinatalism, which could spread more effectively if the world population had already largely accepted veganism. So, what I think we should absolutely avoid is to spread the idea that veganism leads to antinatalism and that it leads to be in favor of the extinction of humanity or of the extinction of the whole sentient life on Earth. For this reason, we must also avoid confusing the two movements. If we are both antinatalist and vegan, I think we need to advocate for them only separately, only in a separate way. Um, there is another thing. There is another thing to consider. I think, in particular, the position and movement that focuses on reducing wild animal suffering. Uh, it might be a tricky one. This is a movement that has not yet been born, but it's starting both from some fringes of the vegan movement and the antinatalist one, as well as from people who are not part of those movements. Uh, but a movement against wild animal suffering could act as a bridge and a further link between veganism and antinatalism. And this too is something we need to avoid. The creation and growth of this new movement is very important, but it must be approached with great caution, in my opinion. It is necessary to ensure that it doesn't damage the effective development of veganism. So I think it is therefore important that this new movement goes separate from the others and that it doesn't include vegan positions or antinatalist positions. So I think we should not mm, You should not do vegan advocacy together with antinatalist advocacy. So let's keep the two separate, and let's avoid focusing on vegans for antinatalist advocacy.